Welcome to African Tales. We share
I come from
stories,
a small
stories.
village in Nigeria where life is simple and everyone knows each other very well. And in my village, farming is not just work, but it is the way we survive and feed our families. In this village, when the sun shines very hot and the ground becomes dry and hard, people say it is the dry season. And during this time, many farmers rest and wait because they believe that real work only begins when the rain starts to fall from the sky. The elders sit under the big mango tree in the center of the village and talk about the coming rains. The women gather near their homes to share stories while they sort their seeds, and the young men move around proudly, saying that when the rain comes, they will prepare their gardens quickly because they are strong and fast. In my village, most people have the same habit every year, and that habit is that they wait until they see dark clouds in the sky before they begin clearing their land. When the first drops of rain touch the ground, that is when they rush with their hoes and cutlasses to slash bushes, plough the soil, and dig holes for planting. And they believe that as long as they work very fast, everything will turn out well for them. They do not think much about preparing early because they say that the rain will give them enough time. In that same village, there is a man called Jacobo, and I have always watched him closely because he is not like the others. Jacobo is not the loud type who talks too much, and he does not follow the crowd just because everyone is doing the same thing. He walks slowly, speaks gently, and thinks deeply before he acts, and many people do not understand why he behaves differently. Some villagers even laugh quietly and say that Jacobo thinks too much for a simple farmer, but I have always felt that there is something special about the way he sees things. As the dry season continued and the sun kept shining strongly over our village, many people were resting and waiting for the rain, but I noticed that Jacobo was looking at his piece of land in a way that showed he was planning something in his heart. And that was where everything began to change in our village story. It was during that same dry season, when the sun was still shining very hot over our village and the ground was still dry and hard, that I began to see something that surprised me very much. Because while everyone else was still resting and waiting for the rains to come, Jacobo did not sit down like the others, but instead he carried his tools and walked quietly to his garden very early in the morning. I remember watching him from a distance and wondering why he was going to work when there was no rain yet. And I could see the dust rising around his feet as he stepped on the dry soil. Jacobo started by slashing the tall dry grasses and clearing away the old weeds that had grown during the past season, and he worked slowly but carefully as if he was not in any hurry but was thinking about something bigger than that moment. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the heat became stronger, I saw sweat running down his face, but he did not complain and he did not stop, because he continued clearing his land until it looked neat and ready. Some villagers who passed by began to laugh and shake their heads, and they said that Jacobo was wasting his strength because the rain had not even started falling yet, and they told him that he should rest and wait like everyone else. Jacobo did not argue with them, and he did not try to prove anything with many words, because he simply smiled in a calm way and continued doing his work, as if he could already see the future in his mind. After clearing the land, he began to plough the soil and break the hard ground into soft earth. And he turned the soil again and again until it was loose and ready for planting. While other men were sitting under the big mango tree, talking about when the rain would finally come, Jacobo was busy digging small ridges and shaping his garden carefully, so that when water would fall, it would not wash away the soil. What surprised me even more was that Jacobo did not only prepare his land, but also prepared his seeds very carefully, because I saw him sorting his beans and maize at home in the evening, removing the bad ones and keeping only the healthy seeds that looked strong and full of life. He stored them properly in clean containers and kept them safe from insects and dirt, and he treated those seeds as if they were treasures that would one day bring him joy. The villagers continued to laugh at him, and some even said that Jacobo was trying to show that he was wiser than everyone else, but he did not answer them, and he did not allow their words to change his plan. Because every day during that dry season, I saw him improving his garden little by little Looked
until
fully
his
prepared
land
and peaceful, even though there was still no sign of rain in the sky. After Jacobo finished clearing, ploughing, and shaping his garden so carefully during the dry season, there came a time when his land was completely ready, and it looked so smooth and well arranged that anyone who passed by could see that he had put his whole heart into preparing it. The soil was soft and turned properly, the ridges were straight and strong, and his seeds were already sorted and safely kept in his house, waiting for the right moment. At that time, the sun was still shining brightly over our village, and the wind was still dry and dusty. But Jacobo had already completed everything he needed to do. While Jacobo's garden stood ready and quiet, the rest of the village continued living as usual, because most people believed that there was still plenty of time before the rains would come. The elders still gathered under the big mango tree and talked about how the clouds would soon change. The young men laughed and played, and many farmers kept saying that once the first rain fell, they would quickly rush to their farms and prepare everything in just a few days. They were not worried at all because they trusted their strength and speed, and they believed that hard work done quickly would be enough. As for Jacobo, he did not join in their laughter, and he did not boast about what he had already done, because after finishing his preparation, he simply waited patiently and calmly for the rain. Every morning he would walk to his garden and look at the soil, touching it gently with his hands as if he was greeting an old friend, and then he would return home with a peaceful heart. He did not look stressed, and he did not look confused like someone who had forgotten something important, because he knew deep inside that he had done his part. I remember feeling curious during that time because I could see two different ways of living in the same village, and one way was full of noise and delay, while the other way was quiet and prepared. The dry season slowly began to change as small clouds started appearing in the sky from time to time, and the air began to feel different in the evenings, but even then most villagers were still relaxed and saying that the real rain had not yet started. Meanwhile, Jacobo continued to wait with confidence, and his prepared land stood ready like a sleeping giant that was only waiting for water to wake it up. It was not long after that season of waiting that one evening the sky began to change in a way we had not seen for many months, because dark clouds slowly gathered above our village and covered the bright sun that had been shining for so long. The wind began to blow in a cool and gentle way, carrying the sweet smell that always comes before the rain, and everyone in the village lifted their heads to look at the sky with excitement and surprise. I could hear children shouting happily and elders saying that the long-awaited rainy season had finally arrived. Before the night became too dark, the first drops of rain began to fall softly on the dry ground, and the sound of water touching the dusty earth was like music in our ears, because we had waited for that moment for a very long time. Soon the soft drops became heavy rain, and the whole village was filled with the sound of water pouring down on rooftops, trees, and open land. People ran outside to feel the rain on their skin, and many farmers began talking loudly about how they would wake up very early the next morning to start clearing and ploughing their gardens. When morning came, the village was no longer calm and relaxed as it had been during the dry season, because everywhere I looked, I saw people rushing with their tools in their hands and worry on their faces. The same men who had laughed during the dry season were now moving quickly to cut bushes, turn the wet soil, and dig ridges before the rain continued again. Some of them looked tired after only a short time because working on wet land is not easy, and the soil stuck heavily to their tools as they tried their best to prepare their gardens in a hurry. In the middle of all that noise and rushing, I saw Jacobo walking calmly toward his already prepared garden, and there was no fear or confusion in his steps because his land was ready and waiting. While others were still struggling to clear weeds and shape their ridges, Jacobo simply carried his carefully selected seeds and began planting them gently into the soft soil that had been prepared long before the rain arrived. He moved steadily across his field, placing each seed in its place with care and covering it properly, and there was a quiet smile on his face as he worked. As the rain continued to fall in the following days, many villagers were still trying to finish preparing their land, but Jacobo had already completed his planting, and his garden rested peacefully under the rain. After Jacobo finished planting his seeds so calmly, while others were still struggling to prepare their land, the rain continued to fall gently over our village for many days, and the ground became soft and full of life in a way that made everyone hopeful. I remember waking up one morning and walking past Jacobo's garden, and I could hardly believe what my eyes were seeing because tiny green shoots were already pushing their way out of the soil as if they were greeting the sun for the first time. Those small plants looked fresh and strong, standing upright with confidence, and it was clear that they had started growing earlier than the others. At that same time, many villagers were just finishing their planting because they had spent many days clearing bushes and shaping ridges after the rain had already begun. Some of them looked tired and worried because they knew they had lost precious time, and even though they tried their best to catch up, their seeds had only just been placed in the ground. When people passed by Jacobo's farm and saw his crops already growing well, they could not hide their surprise, and they began whispering among themselves about how he had managed to move so far ahead. As the weeks went by, Jacobo's beans spread their leaves wide and green, his maize grew tall and straight, and other crops filled his garden with beauty and promise. And each time the rain fell, it felt as though it was blessing a field that had been waiting patiently for it. Meanwhile, some other farms struggled because the soil in certain places had not been prepared properly before the heavy rains, and in a few gardens water collected in the wrong areas because the ridges had been made in a hurry. I could see that preparation was making a clear difference, and it was teaching a lesson without speaking any words. During this growing season, I noticed that Jacobo did not laugh loudly at the others or boast about his success. But there was a quiet joy in the way he walked through his field and touched the leaves of his crops as if he was proud of the work he had done earlier. Some villagers began to greet him with more respect than before, and a few even asked him gentle questions about how he had known to prepare so early. The same people who once thought he was wasting his energy were now watching his garden carefully, because his crops were growing strong and healthy, while many others were still small and trying to catch up. As time continued to pass and the rainy season slowly began to calm down, Jacobo's garden changed from being just green and fresh to becoming full and heavy with crops that were ready for harvest. And I could see that his hard work during the dry season was now standing proudly before everyone's eyes. His maize had grown tall with big golden cobs hanging strongly on the stalks. His beans were full inside their pods, and the whole garden looked rich and beautiful, like a place that had been carefully planned from the beginning. When the wind blew across his farm, the crops moved gently, as if they were dancing in celebration of the coming harvest. In other parts of the village, some farmers were still waiting for their crops to mature properly because they had planted later, and although many of them had tried their best, their harvest was not as full or as strong as Jacobo's. I could see the difference clearly, and so could everyone else, because Jacobo's farm stood out like a shining example of what careful preparation can do. People began to gather near his garden more often, not to laugh as they once did, but to admire and learn from what they were seeing. When the time for harvesting finally arrived, Jacobo stepped into his garden with a thankful heart and began collecting his crops one by one, and I watched as basket after basket was filled with healthy maize, beans, and other produce that looked fresh and plentiful. His compound soon became busy with the sound of sorting and storing the harvest, and there was joy in his home because his efforts had brought abundance. It was not just about having food to eat, but also about the feeling of peace that comes from knowing that you prepared well and did not wait until the last minute.